And then we'll rough it out. Right. Looks like we're live. Hey there, folks. So while folks are joining in here, we're going to do the typical thing. I'm going to kind of ignore the screen. We've got some folks up here live, so we're going to do a little round-robin introduction before we jump right into it. So just go ahead and hang on as you're jumping in. There'll be dead air for just a couple minutes, and then we'll dive right in. You want to start us off?
I'm Sue, and you? Sunridge. And I live in Toronto.
It's a good neighbor for a gardener.
Yes.
Yeah, Chuck, we live in Sunridge.
Cool. And does anybody have strawberries going at home? Sure.
Yeah.
One and only? Alright, cool. Well, and I don't know if y'all saw, I do have some plants available for today. So yeah, got 4-inch and some larger ones. So we can sell those for $5 pop if anyone wants to take some home today. Most of them are looking pretty darn good. So hey there, welcome, welcome. So we just did quick round robin introduction. So you just want to tell us your name, where you're at in town. I don't know if you have a big garden, small garden. Cool. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. And so you know as well, I'm streaming on Facebook. We had one person for a second there, but they already bailed. So we'll see if they jump back in. I'm going to kind of talk at the screen. But it looks like we'll maybe mostly be ignoring the screen. So that'll be kind of cool. So we're going to talk all about strawberries today, and we'll try and hit kind of start to finish. Come on now. Propagation techniques, what we could do starting with strawberries we took home today. We'll cover fertilization, how to spread and manage the patch, how to protect them from pests. And then there's also, if you end up getting strawberries from somewhere else, or look into ordering strawberries, getting different genetics, there's 3 main types. And so we'll go over those 3 main types of berries. And then pest control. Pest management, protecting the fruits through ripening to harvest, and fertilization are the other big aspects. It took a few years for us to get any kind of moderate success with the strawberries. You know, the typical home gardener comment is, oh, the plants look great, they grow great, the berries are tiny. They taste good, but they're tiny and there are not many of them. So, you know, we had, in the hoop house up here, we grew some Driscoll monsters, as I like to call them, but fully organic. And the only difficulty we've had is protecting them from pests. For us, it's isopods, which is the fancy name for roly-polies and sow bugs. Slugs are a little bit of an issue up here, although they're pretty isolated in our area. You've got to have a moist garden in the right spot to get the slug issues. And have only had moderate success in protecting them so far. So trying some new techniques this year, and have some confidence that we'll be able to take care of them. So kind of looking at our pest management with them a little more comprehensively. So, you know, we follow what we call an integrated pest management plan, which is kind of a tiered pyramid style of looking at your pest management. So starting out with prevention and cultural practices, moving up to mechanical, physical removal or destruction of the pests, then moving up to biological controls, so other insects, and then the tippy top, the last resort would be chemical management, so pesticides, herbicides. One of the things we'll be using is a pesticide bait called Sluggo. We'll get more into that, but you know, it's organic, it's iron based, it's not going to harm the soil or our organisms at large, supposedly and hopefully. So we're going to be exploring that. So my name is Will. I'm the site manager up here for the Greenhouse Project. Those of you that don't know, the Greenhouse Project, we're a local nonprofit here in Carson City, Nevada. Sometimes we get folks on from other places, so I remember to mention where we're at. But, and we grow produce for the food banks in town. So pretty much all of our edibles, I don't know, 95, 98% plus of our edible stuff we donate to Fish Salvation Army, the senior center from this site, and then there's a couple other local food banks, Circles and Ron Woods, that we donate to. For fundraising, we sell plants. We've also sold bouquets at farmers market in the past, although we're probably shifting out of that this season, and going to take on more of an educational presence. And then we have a large educational focus as well. Our other site is located at Carson High School and going into, I think it's 15th season this year. We're going into our 5th season at this site up here. So that's kind of our organization in a nutshell. We're not certified organic because we don't sell produce, so certification wouldn't really make sense. But we follow organic standards, and typically we go beyond organic standards. Again, avoiding any biocide whenever possible, even if it's organic. So we strive for no spray, although we aren't quite there. So we use some soaps, and we still spray compost tea, obviously. So strawberries. Feel free to jump in with any questions just as we're cruising through. So the 3 types. Well, first off, one thing to think about is where strawberries show up in the wild, what kind of plant they are compared to a lot of other plants we grow in the garden. A lot of our garden plants, our annual vegetables and stuff are going to be pioneer species that in the wild they're going to be, in meadows and pastures and open sunny spaces, right? Does anybody know where strawberries show up in the wild? Anybody ever eaten wild strawberries? Yeah, definitely. They're often in that transition zone of like the forest edge. So they're going to be under shrubbery, under trees. They don't need a full day of direct sunlight. They can definitely get away with 6 hours direct sun and a little bit of indirect light. And so what that means is they have different soil requirements. They're not showing up in barren, sandy, beds. They're not really showing up creekside. So forest edge is what we're going to want to mimic. So they definitely can serve a strong purpose as a perennial ground cover, near fruit trees, near landscaping or edible shrubs. And they can do all right in raised beds. We grow them in raised beds exposed as well. So that's something we want to consider for placement, although we do have options. And when we get into our soil, particularly regarding pH, that's going to be the big one. Most perennial plants, and especially ones that are found in, forest systems or ecosystems that are higher in succession, more mature ecosystems, they're typically going to be more acidic soils. And we have typically pretty basic and even more so alkaline soils, which alkaline soils means that they resist going acidic. Not just that they are basic and have a high pH, but they actually resist and don't want to drop their pH. So that's important for our soil preparation and how we care for them over time. So we'll talk about strategies for amending our soil pre-planting and over time. for nurturing that lower pH. The three types that we have are day neutral, ever bearers, and June bearers. Day neutral are insensitive to day length, so that means anytime the temperature is between 35 and 85, they're going to be producing blossoms, fruits, and runners. So they're not a bad option for us, but because our temperatures swing so much, that'll affect them continuing to make that production. So if we want continuous production, we'll end up looking at everbearers. And it turns out the variety that we have, which we propagated from our other site, turns out to be an everbearer, almost certainly. Although we thought they were June bearers based on their behavior outside without much love at our other site. And so the everbearers, these varieties, they produce buds during long days of summer and short days of fall. So when the days start shortening again, the summer buds and flowers, they fruit in the fall. So they'll give you fall fruit. And then those fall formed buds, they fruit the following spring. So we're pretty sure that's what we have because they seem to produce a couple crops for us as opposed to just producing consistently. There's a chance they're day neutral. It's kind of hard to tell, and we don't know the background. But and then the June bearers are what's typically considered best for the home garden, and that's a single crop in the spring, and that comes from fall formed buds. And so there's some importance there because they form those buds in the fall, then they go dormant all winter, and then that bud's going to pop out and fruit for you. But it's already formed in the fall, so you can't do anything to make it better or bigger or fertilize it in the spring, really. You can do a little bit during the fruit ripening, but mostly you need to do fall fertilization when that bud's forming to get your big fruits the following season. We just fertilized in here for the second time. So we did a fall fertilization, but then we just spread a bunch of beds. So we did another fertilize. But that's not going to really affect those buds and flowers. It'll be affecting, you know, the next crop and their growth throughout the season. So for
we should use an acidic fertilizer then?
definitely, yep. Their ideal soil pH is going to be 5.5 to neutral. So, and you know, we're typically 7.5, 8.5, sometimes as high as 9, depending how much you've amended. And what the soil is. You know, if you're filling raised beds, there's a good chance, you know, if you're filling it with triple mix, potting soils, raised bed mixes, things like that, you're probably going to be neutral or slightly below. But you can look up, it's pretty easy to do a soil slurry test. You can look up soil slurry test online and check your beds. That's an easy, you know, pH is relatively easy to check at home yourself. Testing your soil is wise. But pH you can check out yourself pretty easily. So with planting, 6 to 10 hours a day of direct sunlight. So, you know, we get plenty of sun, so they can tolerate partial shady, you know, partial shade locations in our climate for certain. They can tolerate a lot of different soil types, although like many plants, they prefer, you know, loamy stuff. Good drainage is key. Again, as with most plants, so you know, if you're planting in our native soil, you need to consider the clay content. If you're in raised beds that you're filling up, you're probably going to be okay. They do like a decent amount of nutrition. So you know, aged manure, compost are great to be working in the soil a few weeks before planting, a couple months before planting. So pre-planting for pH, pelleted sulfur is an easy, relatively easy amendment that can get you some good initial results. In high quantities, it can have negative impacts on fungi in the soil. So it's not something that I'd recommend looking at as a seasonal application. If you're looking at native soil or you know you have a high pH area you're working with, do that once initially and pay attention to the application rate to get yourself in a good neighborhood from the get-go, and then we'll be relying on biology and organic matter after that. Organic matter in the soil and minimizing disturbance are the two other main kind of passive methods we have of reducing our soil pH. The byproduct of fungi in the soil is humic and fulvic acids that acidifies the soil. The main thing that will destroy fungal life is soil disturbance, tillage being kind of like number one in my mind. Although biocides, anything that's going to kill microbial life in soil, even if you're not tilling, that's the same effect. And then what happens is bacterial life tends to bounce back more quickly. Their byproducts are usually ammonia-based, and that's going to raise our pH. So the whole idea is that we're shifting the soil biology from bacterially dominant to fungal dominant. And that's ideal for fruit trees, shrubs, lots of perennials. The main exception is that a lot of our brassicas, cole crops, and some of our other brassicas and cole crops are synonymous, but some of our other annual vegetables, they tend to prefer bacterially dominated soils. You know, some brassicas are known to put out fungal inhibitors in the soil. So, you know, we don't practice a lot of crop rotation through space. We think of our crop rotation more through time, but that's one of the exceptions is with brassicas. So raised beds and containers are great options because we're filling the containers with soil, so we have control over that from the get-go. And that also makes for great drainage. We know that we're going to get good drainage, and we can monitor that in containers and raised beds. Also, strawberries don't need, they don't have particularly large root systems. So when we're planting, typically we plant 8 to 12 inches apart for strawberry beds, and that's also kind of how we'll want to manage runners. We'll talk about the babies in a few. But so that makes them good candidate for small pots. They actually make special strawberry pots that you may have seen. They have the big central section, and they've got a couple little side areas that you can fill with soil, and it's easy to transplant them out. And that's because they send out what's called runners. The technical term is a stolon, which is an above ground rhizome. So if we're familiar with rhizomes, it's kind of like half stem, half root. They grow underground. Lots of aggressive weeds and nasty grasses grow that way. So a stolon's the same thing. It's half stem, half root, or that's probably not the best way to describe it, but it's not really either. It's some combination too, but it grows above ground. So they send out these runners. They'll have little leaflet spots on it, which we call the daughters, and those will root in moist soil if the conditions are right, but you can't remove them from the mother until they've established roots. So you can't just clip those off and then root them. They have to root before we can free them of the mother, and that does take energy away from fruit and bud production. So you've got to pick and choose with your plants, or you're going to sacrifice some of your berry production to keep propagating your plants. So now that we've got established areas, the way we've kind of taken to, although Ellie can attest to how wild and crazy and overgrown the beds got over the past 3 years, we've gotten to the point now where we've got kind of big, mature plants in relatively large containers, 2 to 5 gallon containers. We'll be trying to use those for our mothers and let them send out runners and propagate babies from those. And then all of our plants that we're trying to get berries from in the beds, we're just going to be pruning those off, diligently pruning those off.
What if we take off the runners? How does that affect the mother plant?
Nothing. No, it's just like any other basic pruning. We talk about like clipping off flower clusters on tomato plants to get the other fruit to ripen early. We're just redirecting the energy. So it's
more growth anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not the plant's relatively ready to cut off that runner. So like cutting off the stolon doesn't hurt the plant at all. It just redirects that energy into it continuing to produce the fruits, flowers, and not send it into making another plant. So we've got, yep. Nope, go ahead.
Since strawberries are shallow for the
Mm-hmm.
root, they live in the gutter.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. They're great. That's very common. Gutter or like 3-inch PVC pipe planting, they're a great candidate for hydroponics, and people do them in the nutrient film technique, which is, yeah, like, net pots in a constant flow of water or in a gutter. Yep. I've got kind of a fantasy plan for doing hydroponics on the north side of the hoop house and running gutters the full length. They just haven't, yeah, it'll be a big project. So, yep, hanging baskets are great. And when we're talking about pests, that's going to be one of the easiest ways to get them away from pests, is having them hanging or in some, away from the soil. Yeah, so that's a great method. Planting them under other taller plants, assuming you can get 8 inches away from their main root zone. Yeah, they make great companion plants or interplanting. Yes, and I haven't had to do so. Sorry, I'm not reading back questions. One question was if the stolen pruning affects the mother plant. Only in a good way. It just redirects energy. And then other question is bird netting. If I use that, I don't, because most of what we're doing for production is inside the hoop house, so the birds don't get in there. I'm only dealing with insect pests. They are pretty common outdoor pests for strawberries. So yeah, floating row cover, this white stuff, or bird netting or something on little mini hoops, or individual plants in containers, really easy to cover and protect from the birds. So definitely worthwhile to do that. And then the other question was with the shallow roots, if they do well in gutters. I'd say a definite yes, and I think there's good examples out there. Oh yeah, there's an Instagram guy called the Plant Charmer. Check out the Plant Charmer on Instagram. He's done these really cool A-frame rain gutter grows, and he's done strawberries, lettuce, and a couple other crops. So, and then the last, yeah. So strawberries are sprawling plants, and that's because they send out, those stolons with the dogger plants. And then those in turn will send out their own runners. So if you don't manage that, strawberry beds can get overgrown in a really short order. Luckily in the wintertime they're easy. The root, they go pretty much bare root. I think properly bare root. So they're easy. They respond well to being dug up and transplanted. Until they start growing again, then they're going to be a little more sensitive. One of the main things with transplanting and potting strawberries, and especially as they're spreading, because sometimes they aren't totally straight, and sometimes they grow a little funny. You have to look where new leaf growth is coming from, and it's hard when they're dormant, but they call it the crown, and it'll be close to the base of where whatever leaves are still attached are. But you got to make sure you don't bury the crown. They're kind of they can be finicky about how deep they're buried. So you want to pay special attention to where the soil level is once you're done planting. So that crown isn't buried, because that'll promote rot, and we don't want to have it too exposed, because it'll dry out and it won't grow nicely, especially in our dry climate. So the other part is because they're relatively shallow rooted, you don't need to dig very deep for them. It's more important to dig 2 to 3 times wider and loosen the soil 2 to 3 times as wide as your pot. So if you're putting a little guy in, or if you order little plugs, dig a little wider. Don't have to worry about digging too deep. Drainage being the consideration there. If you know the bottom, you've got a bunch of clay in the bottom of your hole, loosening up, digging a little bit might be worth it. And I got a question. Bonnie's asking if it takes. Hi, Bonnie. Asking if it takes several years to harvest a good yield with everbearing. Not really. The first year of planting, as with lots of fruiting crops, it's worthwhile to remove blossoms and flowers and not let them establish in their space the first season. But then that second season after establishment, assuming we fertilize well and we're removing our runners, should immediately be going into a decent crop that second year. And they're considered to be productive for 2 or 3 years, and then they kind of fizzle. So that's in managing our patch as well. We're kind of keeping in mind how old our plants are, and planning our babies. At some point, second or third year, we're going to need to propagate, or we're going to want to propagate some of those runners to replace some of the older plants. And I'll show you, we've got examples of that in the hoop house. So sorry, Bonnie, I'm not going to bring the laptop in there. But yeah, if next time you're out here, you can come take a peek. We'll show you. But yeah, we'll take a peek and look at those. So I think that's about it for planting. We're going to talk more about daughters. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's what I just mentioned. In the first year, we want to pick off the blossoms and discourage them from fruiting. And so they'll spend their food and energy developing healthy roots. And then the yield will be much greater that second year. So eliminate the daughter plants as needed. And, as I'm putting, basically, if you want berries, limit that. Select a single plant to produce some runners for you, or wait till that second or third year to do that transition. Moisture is really important, partially due to the shallow roots and just the fact that they, particularly when they're ripening and producing those berries, they just like a lot of water. 1 inch per week is what I have in my notes. When we get really hot, we'd probably bump up a little more than that. And then particularly additional water, particularly, light surface waterings when runners and flowers are developing. And then again in the fall, when we do that fall fertilization before the plants go dormant. Keeping the beds mulched yep. No, although say again. No, so that's just for reproduction on the day neutral varieties. The strawberries are true perennials that will absolutely survive outdoors uncovered. These ones here, I haven't had the row cover over all winter. You can see they're still live and growing, and then I'll show you ones we just dug out on Saturday that have also been uncovered all winter. They do appreciate some mulch. That's actually where they get their name from, is covering them up with straw in the wintertime. And you can fully cover them. If they're outside in a cold area, you trim back the foliage and you totally cover them up with mulch. The crown can be buried with mulch. You'll see in the hoop house, I don't do it that way. We mulch around and leave the plant open. Part of that is because slugs and roly-polies. I'm trying to, keep that a little bit of space so that it'll dry a little bit. Although it doesn't matter, they still travel in there. So yeah, first and second generations of those daughters produce higher yields. I have that written. I think it's second and third though. I'm pretty sure second and third is going to be the most productive. So
Will, I have a question.
yeah.
Are you ever supposed to grow strawberries from seed, or you always supposed to do it?
So you can. I have never done it. I've seen strawberry seeds for sale, and growing them from seed, I'm pretty sure it's just going to be an additional year or two. Just like asparagus, right? If you get an asparagus crown, you're waiting 2 years to harvest. If you started from seed, you're probably waiting 4 or 5. Because that's first 2 years. They start out really small. Seeds are tiny. And I've never tried it. I think they're kind of difficult to grow from seed. And because they clone so well and they do go dormant in the winter, they're the typical way you purchase is bare root plugs or just plants in containers. So unless you have a need for genetic diversity or a real reason, I can't see a good reason to go from seed. Unless you just want to do it for fun, but I don't think there's a good reason to.
So, growing from seed, so I know, like, if we go with vegetables, potatoes, and
Mm-hmm.
if you take a strawberry, let's say from the store, you take that, and that's the seed.
Maybe.
It might be gonna radiate though.
There's all kinds of considerations with store-bought produce. The irradiation is, yes, if it's overseas organic. Irradiation, if I'm not mistaken, is organic approved. Can anybody, can they irradiate organic produce? I don't know. Maybe, because I'm pretty sure this section out here was seeds started from bird. Because I didn't ever have plants out here that I think could have set runners. They're a total mystery how they started. And so I think it's probably seed spread from them. My concern there would be sometimes seeds like that, like, tomato seeds, they kind of need some processing typically because they've got that gel being attached to the fruit like that. I don't know how they work. I don't know how they grow strawberries for seed or harvest seeds from those berries. And then, of course, because it's tiny seeds and it's a whole bunch of them, you're going to end up with a dense, if it did work, you'd end up with a dense cluster. Totally. But I don't know. That's something I'd have to look up. Yeah, and I've left plenty of fruit that have gotten gross or eaten on the ground, and I don't think they've sprouted. So I don't know. That's a darn good question. And that was whether grocery store strawberry seed, since they're covered in the seed, if you could just essentially plant the strawberry like we can do with some other veggies, and I just don't know.
So the seeds they want genetic material, right? So growing that you don't know what you're gonna get possibly in terms of like production or
Maybe that's a whole other thing I don't know. Some fruits are true to seed, so like citrus and peaches are true to seed. You plant it, it's pretty well, not all citrus, but most pretty reliable that you're gonna get fruit from the offspring that tastes like the parent. Apples and pears and what else? There's a whole bunch that aren't, and that's why grafting is standard protocol. And that's the same with vegetable seed, hybrid vegetable seed. Tons of variation. It's not stable. If you save seed, you're going to get all kinds of mutations. Heirloom or open pollinated seed, it's been stabilized with open pollination. So it's the genetics have been stabilized, so you're pretty reliable. You might get some crossing, but it's not going to be wild like an F1. So I don't know if strawberries are true to seed or not. So yeah, you could get crazy wild stuff, but there's also benefits to genetic diversity, right? Resiliency. Although I haven't heard about issues with senescence or anything bad with ongoing cloning of the strawberries. I know some plants that's an issue. Bananas, they're really concerned about it because, lack of genetic diversity in a food product that we only propagate via clone leaves it really, really susceptible to getting wiped out by a disease. And so bananas are a good example where, they're a giant grass that we just clone the grass clump and they don't produce viable seed. If they produce seed, it's sterile. I think we've bred that out of them entirely. And now we've gotten to the point where we only really grow like 2 or 3 varieties at any kind of scale. There's small growers in Florida and Hawaii and tropical places, Central America, that grow the miniatures and the Cavendish and all kinds of really cool bananas. If you get a chance to eat strange, exotic banana varieties in tropical places, it's pretty exciting. But the potential for them to get wiped out by some crazy disease is very, very high. You can read about that with the mosaic virus and papayas in Hawaii, where papayas almost got eliminated from the Hawaiian Islands, and that's actually a success story of genetic modification. And where you might be surprised to hear that somebody like me is not against genetic modification technology, just what they're modifying at scale in most cases. Modifying something to have resistance to a virus that might wipe out production is not the same as modifying something to be tolerant of being doused in chemicals, So, sorry, tangent. Yeah. Yeah, right. So, yeah, we'll hop in. We will. Oh, you mean tropical tour?
Yeah.
I wish. That's some serious fundraising. I hope. I hope. We'll have to start fundraising now. Yeah, are you gonna start the Kickstarter? So yeah, I don't know anything about strawberries with seeds. I looked at some seeds for like a white variety once, and I have some interest, but they're so easy to propagate, and I'm keen on getting this variety into production and getting that handled before really experimenting or trying other stuff. So I can't remember what it was called. I don't know if it was Snow something or Albino, but I think it was Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. They're one of those seed suppliers that has all kinds of rare and very, like, probably the best for obscure vegetables and stuff. They've got like a handled watermelon. Watermelon's got like a handle like a gourd. And there's some thought that may actually be the only true Native American melon. I think it may have actually originated in North America as opposed to Africa, where the rest of our melons come from. So the other thing, mulch will help with the water needs and also would reduce the weed pressure. Again, we talked about organic matter a bit, so it's going to help shift our soil over time. Definitely should be mulching strawberries. The only crops that we don't put organic mulch around anymore are ones that are really short in the ground. So like 60, 90-day crops, we may not be mulching around. Root and especially salad greens and stuff, it's going to mess up harvest and make harvest really messy. To have straw in the bed, we won't do it. So if we're cutting baby greens with scissors, straw sucks. It doubles cleanup time. But for the strawberries, they should definitely be mulched. And in the wintertime, you can prune back foliage, mulch over entirely, and then pull that back in the spring when we warm up. Be diligent with weeding, and especially in the first few months after planting. Do most of that weeding by hand when the roots are still sensitive. You can use hose and hula hose and stuff and light cultivating tools once they're established for sure. When the growing season's over, you can mow or cut the foliage, so you can just trim them back basically to like an inch. You'll see where that crown is, so you don't go to that, but you can prune off all the rest of it back. Then you can mulch 4 to 8 inches deep. Straw, pine needles, wood chip mulch is great, especially the mixed arborist mulch, but with that you go a little on the thinner side, thicker on the lighter materials. And that can be done after the first couple frosts or when air temps are in the 20s. Is what I have. So they can tolerate pretty cold. And I didn't do that on this section out here or the other section that we just dug babies out of. Didn't prune them back, and did not mulch over the top of them. They did just fine. They probably would have grown a little more and maybe been a little more robust, but it was not a concern. And then the only note on that is, since we're windy and we're doing this over winter, you need to consider what your mulch material is and what you need to do to keep it in place. So, snow fencing or that like plastic emergency kind of mesh fencing, maybe your bird netting, you stake down over your mulch, and then just bring it up over your hoops in the season. I love the frost cloth. For that reason, the frost cloth kind of acts like a mulch, but will also keep real mulch in place. So we use that a lot. The only downside is it's a plastic product, but we get 3 to 4 seasons out of it, even when we're not treating it great. Leaving it on the ground, walking on it and stuff, we still usually get 3 to 4 seasons before it's too tattered to use. So, and for the floating row cover or agribon is the stuff we're talking about. Now somebody in there still. And then pull the mulch off the top early spring. Not after danger of frost has passed. Obviously, we're not going to wait till May or June to pull that mulch back. Our strawberries are going to be cranking by then. So, this time of year, this month is probably safe for pulling mulch back off if we're mulching all the way over the top. And then, the last little note I have before jumping into pests. I've got insect pest stuff in my brain, not in my outline. Row cover is a good secondary option and kind of a more utilitarian option than bird netting to protect them from the birds. So although bird netting certainly works, I just love the row cover because we use it all over the place, as you can see. The white stuff, the agribon, call that floating row cover. So it comes in a couple different weights and provides, depending on the weight, 2 to 4 up to like 6 to 8 degrees of frost protection. Also, it's even the heavyweight stuff is like 65% light transmission, and then the lighter weight is 75 or 85% light transmission. So it's really good for protecting from the sun, pseudo shade cloth, keeping a little humidity in. If we do a beneficial insect release, we can use it to keep them inside. We can use it to isolate a crop from pests from coming in. So it's really got a lot of uses. We use it all over the place. We lay it down flat when we're germinating things, put it up on hoops. Yeah. So the insect pests, and so birds and insects are the only ones we've had issues with. And as far as insects go, it's really just been slugs and roly-polies. Rodents could potentially be an issue, but I haven't seen them interact with our strawberries at all. And I've seen them, we have field mice climbing up and munching tomato plants and doing things like that. We have voles around that'll hit certain crops and haven't had any issues with the rodents. Because most of what we're doing for production is in the hoop house, we also haven't had to do much bird protection. But in general, you don't need to do any protection while the berries are white or green. It's not until they start ripening that the pests tend to go after them, and usually they're going to do it. You're going to look like you're in the clear, and then you're going to think, oh, I'm going to harvest tomorrow, or I'm going to harvest the next day. It's like, oh, I'm going to wait for that white, that little bit of white to redden up, and then you're going to come back and it's going to be munched. Or partially munched, and, the isopods, sometimes it's just a little bit of cosmetic damage up at the top of the berry near the leaves, but they're kind of like, a mold and disease vector, so they start that going bad cycle much earlier, even though the berry's still fine. So it's, we still want to avoid that. One of the biggest things to protect from, and the slugs are kind of the same way, and we have less of them, but they are present. So, having some, if you're in protected, having airflow, if you're outside, you don't have to worry about it. That'll help, especially with the slugs. But really, soil contact or contact with the mulch is where the damage is going to come from. Elevating, getting the berries off the ground just a little bit is huge. So hanging baskets, gutters, containers, all really great ways to do it, particularly, at the home scale. If you are going to plant in a bed and have them, down in the soil, I'd recommend making a plan ahead of time. And really, it's, the labor plan of protecting all of those berries. The method I'm going to use primarily up here is they sell, and I don't remember the supplier because I haven't ordered them. I'm going to order this weekend these little plastic trays that go around each plant. I didn't do them in the past because I mistook the price as being for a single one, and it turned out it was for a 5-pack. So they're actually pretty reasonable. I think they came out, it was like $3 or $4 a pop. Heavy duty plastic, so I imagine it'll last many seasons. And they go around the plant. They've got these, I think, 3 or 4 little kind of trays off to the side per unit that you can move around. And I can't describe the engineering very well, but they're breathable and they elevate the fruit off the ground. You can elevate the whole blossom cluster and put them on top of that. So I'm going to get those for all of the plants in the hoop house and get those set up and see how that goes. The other good one I looked at was they make fruit nets for lots of different types of fruits for what to protect them from, like moss and different, worms, to protect apples and peaches from worms on the tree. I didn't see any that were small for strawberries, but you can also, I saw folks that were doing DIY with pantyhose, but that means literally going out and covering every single little cluster. So you have to think about how big your area is going to be and what you're going to plant. Containers might just be the ticket. Chuck mentioned he thinks he might have some earwigs as well, and they kind of operate in pretty much the same way as the isopods and the slugs. You know, they're mostly nocturnal. So if you're not sure, the other way is to go out at nighttime with a flashlight and look underneath, and you'll probably see who's doing damage. But they're all kind of work the same way. You know, it's moisture and darkness, soil contact. So if you can eliminate those things, you're going to be way ahead. The other thing I'm going to be doing, because the isopods are not just an issue with strawberries for me, they also are attacking seedlings right now, and they do some other basic, mostly cosmetic damage, aside from the seedlings. They will wipe out seedlings in certain cases. Supposedly Sluggo, which is this iron, I don't think it's chelate, but it's some kind of iron product, so it's organic, you know, it's essentially extra mineral for the soil. Not that our soils are lacking in iron, but it's a bait that will kill slugs, and it's supposed to kill snails, supposed to kill isopods. I think earwigs might have been on the label as well, although I don't remember for sure. So gonna be trying that and seeing how that affects the isopod population. Some folks don't have issues with the roly-polies. The reason we have such an abundant population is because of all the mulch you see around. I try and mulch the entire site every couple years, you know, as much as possible. And they just come with the territory. So because they're generally not a pest, it's not an issue, but going to try and manage that population this season. They do have plenty of predators, you know, little snakes, frogs, lizards, toads, several spider species, almost anything bigger than them down in the soil drownings. But they roll up into little balls and become pretty unpalatable, so they're not the favorite food of a lot of those things. So biological control is just difficult. The other thing that works pretty well, and I've done a bit, it's just the tedium of doing it in the space, is beer traps. And beer and soy sauce are both supposed to work. It's also one that works for earwigs, slugs, and roly-polies. Old beer works just fine. Less hops is better. So those popular, trendy IPAs and stuff are not the best choice. You know, some moose drool or a regular lager or ambers and browns are going to be the best. High. I'm serious. I'm very serious. High malt, low, and what that is, it's high malt, low hop. Real simple. High malt, low hop is. Yep. Or soy sauce. And the way it works is you need to mix a little bit. So the soy sauce of the beer is the bait, and then a little bit of cooking oil is to guarantee the kill. Typically they're going to go in and drown anyway, but the oil will coat them and make sure that they actually suffocate. Oh yeah, you're definitely killing them. You're definitely killing them. Sorry if that was unclear. It's not like a trap. It's not a trap and really. Yeah, I know. What can I say? And I don't feel guilty with them. You know, I'm anti-drowning rodents, because, you know, I battle rodents up here, and so I do, you know, we kill rodents, but I won't drown them. Not about it. You know, and they make those whole live traps for rodents now where you don't even have to look at them. They're just in a tube, and you just submerge it in water and just know they're drowning, and it's, nope. I'll do the snaps all day. You know, no sticky, no drowning. That's kind of my ticket, but...
I'll put up a little sign saying keep off road.
Yeah, could try it. I don't know what language you'd write it in though. That'd be the trick. Yeah, and so basically what you need to do is put it in, you know, the little half tin cans, tuna cans, cat food cans. Basically, the smaller the better, so you don't have to use a lot of material to fill it up. Shallow Tupperware, whatever it is. Bury it down in the soil or mulch so that the edge is close to the soil surface so they can get in to the trap easily, and that's it. The thing is the bait's only effective, you know, for that first day, maybe second day, and especially once they get full of it, you know, and it starts getting really gross really quick. And because there's the little bit of oil in it, I don't feel good about like dumping it in the compost, so then it goes in the trash. So not my favorite method. If the Sluggo works well, I'll stick to that. Initially going to be leading with both. We'll be putting some of the Sluggo around, doing the trapping, and then if it seems to be successful, we'll eliminate the trapping first, and then see what we have to do as far as rebaiting with the sluggo and whatnot. Mm-hmm. They will. So the question is, can we pick berries early? Oh, there's nobody there anyway. Can we pick early and then ripen off the plant? We can, but that's why grocery store berry, you sacrifice a lot of flavor. That's why grocery store berries are notorious for being huge and beautiful, but not very flavorful. Some of that's over fertilization. You can like over fertilize, like if you over fertilize when the berries are ripening. So this is good. And I forgot to mention when we were talking earlier about fall fertilization for those buds, and then whatever you're doing mid-season, like if you're trying to fertilize and pump fertilizer into those berries while they're ripening, they will get bigger and respond, but they're going to be hollow and not very juicy. You've ever had the big ones that are totally hollow? They're cranked full of fertilizer while the berries, they're like force-fed while the berries ripening, but the bud was never that nutritious to begin with. So it's, yeah, they pretty much, yep. And poundage. I mean, well, no, I mean some of that's hollow, but yeah. So you can fall. You gotta, depending on that type, but yeah, you need to be fertilizing when the buds are forming, before the flowers form. And we'll look at that as well. We have a couple that are forming their buds now, so you can see. You can see the difference between the leaf growth node where the crown is and the flowering, the bud where that's going to be a flower. It's these fatter, kind of funny looking, frilly little clusters. So, I think that's about it. We'll just go peek around and look in there. Was there something else I said I was going to mention with pests? I think I hit those three, and birds. There's a couple other products that are very similar to the Sluggo. I really shouldn't be saying that brand like that because I'm not loyal to the brand. I've never used either, but there's a couple other brands. I've heard most about that one, so I am going to try it first. Yeah, so any other questions?
We were talking about the mother plant. Like I've had mine in there for several years. Okay? But what would happen to the plant?
It might keep going and it'll probably keep making babies for it, but yeah, it's probably already to the point, if it's 6 or 7 years old, it's probably never going to make you good fat berries. It's probably already phased out of that. It may only be a mother at this point. Yeah,
it goes out and let the little ones take over.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, and every, planning for like letting them fruit for like 3 years and then cycling, that's kind of the rotation. So figuring out what that looks like with spreading some babies and cutting them out. Got to figure out what your space looks like and how you got to do it. It's not no one answer. All right. So thanks. I know a couple folks tuned in. Appreciate it. We'll see you next time.